VLR.
Welcome to the Saturday Night Cigar Lounge.
And it is a very nice Saturday night here in the great state of Texas, specifically the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. It is Saturday Night Cigar Lounge. I'm your host, Taylor, here on Vigilant Liberty Radio. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. And my guest is a little bit south of me. Actually, probably, about 5-6 hours or so? That would be something fishy. Felicia
A little
Graven.
bit south. Are you making short jokes already? I see what you did there.
Bit. If I wanted to say a lot, or if I wanted to make a short joke, I would have said, well, she comes up to about the middle of my chest.
Oh, yeah, you're totally making a short joke.
Okay, now I'm making a short joke. But before then, I wasn't.
Yeah, and I just want to go on the record. It's beautiful 72 clear here in Houston. So, yeah, sorry you people in the north stuck where it's cold and things. Prairie dog.
Yes, I heard Prairie Dog said something said something about that that it was cold. Although one of the things I'm trying to figure out is it's 79 here in Dallas. NJ Libertarian in the chat room, if you can answer my question about a comment that you made earlier, which was LOL guys, Wendy Davis is so gonna lose. How hilarious is that? Ha 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 ha. Stupid Dems can't win anything in Texas having to do with the fact that San Antonio Mayor Julian Castro is expected to be the head of HUD. NJ, was there sarcasm there on that, or was I missing something there?
Oh, I think it's wonderful because we've seen how often that we get complacent and what is the word I'm looking for? I don't know. I guess just completely aggressive without. Without cause and confident, super confident without cause in some cases. There are those of us who are just not paying attention to all the other things that could be happening. And so it's sort of, hey, we talk big because that's the way we are, and especially in Texas, and that's the end of it.
Yeah. I'm not.
Well, I know you and I have both expressed a lot of concerns about the next, 6 to 12 years in Texas politics.
I'm scared about the next 6 to 12 months.
Well, yeah, I get that. I was looking at a little bit longer game, but, one thing at a time. You're right.
I mean, look, I'm being 100% honest here. I have said from the very beginning that she scared me. That Wendy Davis scares me. That Battleground Texas scares me. And there was a poll. I don't know how much I believe it, but there was a poll very, very recently which had Davis 7 behind seven behind Abbott. Not that I believe the poll, because I've never heard of the group that did it. But, yeah, you don't mess around with that sort of thing.
Well, and when you're looking at that, things all depend on who turns out the most voters, obviously, over and over and over again. We've had that discussion, and the question is, has Battleground Texas efforts in Texas been sufficient to continue to pick up more people, have more folks that they can message to that are interested in, surface politics, that don't need a lot of detail. They just need talking points and, quick, drive-by messaging. And if they've swelled their mailing lists significantly, it is going to be a closer election than people think it is.
Yeah. And of course, let's also remember the other big news that we said something already, but I'm kind of curious about your opinion on Julian Castro going to HUD. It looks
Look what he gets out of it, okay? He gets a base of 2 years' worth of federal experience leading a large agency. That's good for him. That's good for his image. That's good for his national profile. He's going to be able to get in the news much more than as a mayor of a, fairly large-sized town in Texas. He's got multiple, in fact, infinite photo ops available to him and left narratives that are going to be available to him as he's solving housing crises all across the country. He's going to have this large profile that the media is going to, he's an attractive guy. He's got a good story. He's one of two brothers politically that are involved, very interesting looking, hip, young Democrat. I mean, he's got all these things going for him. And he's unattached to any prior Obama scandals or administration gaffes at all. He gets to come in for the last 2 years or so and look like, 2.5 years, and look like a guy unsullied by all that, but still chosen as part of that machine, still on the team, just not dirtied by it. And I think it's important.
To answer Templeton's, the Rat's comment, Templeton, let's try this again. Governors in Texas serve a 4-year term, so you're thinking 2018, not 2016. It should be pointed out that there have been rumblings of him as a possible vice presidential candidate for somebody.
I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised. There's that argument for experience and one part of the ticket and, a great reach to a whole different constituency on the other side. It's why you balance a young Barack Obama with an older Joe Biden in that kind of thinking. So if you have an older candidate coming up, he's going to look very attractive, and it's going to be very much a part of Democrat outreach efforts. So it could happen. I think the Castros are, on the political scene with a rocket attached to them. I really do. I think they are being fast-tracked.
Do you think that, and we're going to get to messaging in just a minute, because that was one of the reasons why I had fishing on. Do you think it was a ploy to have Wendy Davis run as governor, because it seems like she's raising all this money nationally, but not in Texas? Were they thinking of her as a possible candidate of some kind in a national election?
Well, better to try her out at this level than to find out later that she's useless on the national stage, don't you think?
Well, yeah, I agree 100%, and certainly people, nationally do like her on the Democratic side.
Well, her profile got raised very quickly. Again, another meteoric rise, among Democrat celebrities. But you have to also look at Texas' political situation. There is not a deep Democrat bench yet in Texas. And what they're hoping is to get a superstar lined up quickly enough to where it'll start to drag other people up and fill some offices. But Democrats' bench in Texas is not deep. Meanwhile,
it was the Castros and nobody else.
Right, essentially. And then you have on the Republican side all these old white guys who've been in some agency head or another and want to be the head of a committee or the head of an agency that's bigger, or they want to be, comptroller, lieutenant governor, or governor. It's the political escalator in Texas, and all these Republicans have been in power for 20, 30 years. They all want to get to the top of that pyramid, and they're sort of blocking all the talent that could be coming up. So the Democrats have an advantage in that they can move people up quickly. But then again, that also is a disadvantage because, well, there you have, all that lack of experience, and they're not, ready in some cases, like Wendy Davis and others like that.
Yeah. Let's talk messaging. Because you know me, here on Saturday Night Cigar Lounge and Vigilant Liberty Radio, I'm big on solutions. I love solutions. I love discussing problems and then saying, hey, this is a possible solution. Not everyone agrees with me on them, but that's fine. I don't care. At the same time, though, one of the solutions we've got to look at is messaging from a Republican standpoint. The reason why I got on this is that the way that a lot of people know who she is through Eric Erickson calling Wendy Davis abortion Barbie.
Right.
Now I sit there and I say, really? That's the best you've got? Is that? I mean, this does show how Liz Harrison and I share a brain, because they're going, really? Seriously? That's how you solve that? Is by calling her abortion Barbie?
I have no problem with mocking the left in general. I don't.
Right. I have no problem with that either. But you made a very, very good point that, and you've made this before and you've made it again and you'll keep saying it, is that, hey, the left is going after an ideology, whereas the right seems to only be focused on candidates.
Oh, well, it's true, because when you have so many people around, politics, personality politics in Texas. Texas loves characters. Texas loves eccentric people. We had, heroes in terms of everybody from I've already blocked out her name. The latest woman governor we've had.
Ann Richards?
Thank you.
Whose name was just mentioned in the chat and you forgot
her. Yes.
Yeah,
well,
she was a character.
Yes, and then you had, Carol Keaton Strayhorn, whatever.
Rylander, whatever her name is this week.
I just quit. Grandma. Yeah. One tough grandma. That was her thing when she ran for governor. And then you have, Rick Perry's even kind of a character. George Bush has been somewhat, characterized by being a character in some places. Kinky Friedman, we love those guys in Texas. But when you're talking about taking somebody out in a primary, when you're talking about running against them, the easiest thing to do is attack them personally in order to move them off the scene politically. And that's in every state. But in Texas, we tend to have very big characters with very big images, and then we kill them. We knock them off somehow. And there is some value in, of course, poisoning the well for one candidate. But if we're the ones doing it to our own guys, that just sends more fuel across the aisle to the other guys doing it. What they have managed to do is poison the well against conservatives, against Republicans, against Tea Party, all those names are mud among a lot of the general public. Now, not most of them, but you can see polls that are consistently saying that the Tea Party image, the Tea Party brand has lost a lot of support. And there are probably a ton of reasons for that. But one of them is that we've not managed to turn that around on Democrats and say how ridiculous socialist policies are. We're not good at messaging about their shortcomings. We'll pick on their people and we'll make fun of their people, but we have to turn their ideas toxic. What they end up doing is tell great stories about, wouldn't you like to help see X happen? And they build this team of people who think they're going to do these great things. And really what they're doing is just promoting more socialist crap that enslaves and makes life harder for everybody. But no, it sounds really good because they're excellent at storytelling. And I got to say this, why are we afraid to use advertising principles in our messaging? Yeah, why are we afraid to think about the best way to talk about our principles and the best way to characterize the left's principles or lack thereof as severely lacking?
Why do you think that's an issue? Is it just because it's been about winning the next election?
Well, in Texas specifically, it's about winning the next primary.
Well, I'm talking nationally. I'm talking, just in general.
Absolutely,
not just
because
from a Texas standpoint, but just in general.
Who's in charge of building the party nationally? That's the RNC, right?
Yes.
Okay, but who's in charge of the high profile of Republicans, conservatives, or whatever nationally? That's these individual candidates whose number one priority, and this is something that Thomas Sowell has said, their number one priority is getting elected. Their number two priority is staying elected, staying in office, and everything else is a distant third. There's no motivation on the right to have an organization around our principles and our ideals because we're too busy knocking off the guys who, could champion those things. Everybody's got some, I'm never going to work with him. I'm never going to vote for him because he did this X thing. Whatever it might be. If it's Christie and some issue, or if it's Rand Paul and something he said, like recently with voter ID, everybody's got to, I'm not going with that guy. It's a process of elimination instead of seeing who is the guy we can get who will take these principles the farthest and get him to the largest number of people. Because in a republic, in a democracy-oriented republic, we still have to win more votes than the other guys.
Yeah, one of the things I've been kind of concerned about is it has been too candidate-focused. I mean, when you look at people snarking at the opposite side or candidates or whatnot, I don't always see solutions discussed.
No.
Now, let's be honest. The Democrats have been all about demonization since the Johnson-Goldwater race. That's
Well,
as
and
far back
there's
as I can think, because they went went nuts over that. I mean, the Daisy ad, even though it was only shown once, was said to be extremely effective.
Well, and when you're looking at issues and solutions, you keep saying that for that we are about solutions. What happens to the first guy who puts up a solution in Washington? It's immediately batted down as being implausible, unrealistic. I've been reading all day about education solutions. Well, actually all weekend, since early yesterday morning, about education problems and solutions, the problems specifically around Newark and the huge grants they got from Zuckerberg and of Facebook and all the great plans they had and what it looks like all these years later. And how difficult it was. I've been looking at all of those things. And the first guy in every situation who puts up a solution, is the guy who's going to get his head beat in for proposing something that someone doesn't like, which immediately turns them off. So solutions are a dangerous business in politics. It's far easier to do what the left does and just hammer on ideas and hammer on personalities and hammer on a group of people and say that they're unrealistic or cruel or heartless or whatever. It's a lot easier to do that than it is to govern, as people in this administration are learning.
Why do you think it is that?
Well, I think everybody has their own little pet issues, I think, that they like and that they want to see solved, and they think they have the best way to go about it. People don't often listen as much as they want to talk about things, so you don't have solutions. You have mutual complaint societies as well, where I'm going to rail about the thing that I hate, you're going to rail about the thing that you hate. We're going to go home feeling better because we understand there's a lot of problems. And there were Tea Parties that, did their rallies structured around that were not able to transition, and I'm speaking from experience, into positions of how do we do things? How do we change this? How do we get through these political realities? And there are some political realities that are a problem. And when we talk about messaging, we don't resent ads in the business world. We know that a business has got to sell their product and they've got to do it well and skillfully. And they spend a lot of time, money, and resources investing in reaching their targets, right? Well, and if there aren't enough buyers for your product in a business, you go out and find more. You find ways to find more. We don't approach politics that way because it's, again, the product is not the ideas and the conservative movement. The product is a candidate, a guy who you're going to put all your hope in and say, that's going to be the guy that's going to fix it all. And then you can go home and go about your life. And it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. And with that, let's take a real quick break. We will be back here on Saturday Night Cigar Lounge. My guest tonight is something fishy, Felicia Cravens. If you're interested in contributing to the show, you can join our chat room. Just go to vigilantlibertyradio.us and click on chat. Or you can tweet me at EYE Desert Blog. That's at EYE Desert Blog. Fishy is at something fishy with an IE at the very end of it. And feel free to tweet us if you have any questions or comments. We'll be right back after this.
This is the Pint-Sized Pundit, and I am here to tell you that anything Taylor says on Saturday Night Cigar Lounge is his opinion and his opinion only. He does not speak for his employer, his employer's employer, or anyone else. He especially doesn't speak for Liz unless she says so.
We want to welcome Michael Moore to Occupy Wall Street. I'm so impressed by what I'm seeing here.
How much of people's income do you, Michael Moore, want the government to confiscate?
Probably twice what we're paying right now.
It's not envy, it's war.
Where's the rage? Where's the uprising?
Storm the doors of the New York Stock Exchange.
It is a class war.
If the wealthy paid their fair share. For a documentary filmmaker, I do really well. I'm very blessed.
And the rich thought poverty was bad.
I do well.
They get rid of it.
What pure? There's nothing pure about capitalism.
And they know what's coming on Wall Street.
We're seeing the end of capitalism. And I say good riddance.
He is one of my favorite capitalists. Yeah, I want to give him a hug.
A progressive woman once told me that if she was my wife, she'd poison my coffee. I told her if I was her husband, I'd drink it. This is Alan Bordius, host of Their Finest Hour, Monday nights here on Vigilant Liberty Radio.
Hi, this is Jonah Goldberg from National Review, and you're listening to Vigilant Liberty Radio.
You know, I thought that Fishy would appreciate having Jonah Goldberg be her lead-in back here on Saturday Night Cigar Lounge here on Vigilant Liberty Radio. I'm your host, Taylor. Felicia Cravens is my guest, and are you happy with Jonah Goldberg being your lead-in?
I'm a fan, definitely. Jonah and I don't always see eye to eye, but any guy who's going to block the way for me to get through the hall of madness at CPAC and be my body blocker, I'm down with him. That was a real cool thing.
Yeah.
Oh.
I gotta ask you something, because I do want to talk. We had the Hugging More rally fundraiser as one of the lead-ins, and you know, Michael Moore really has been kind of a personality to a degree of the left. Jonah Goldberg is considered a personality on the right, but a very, very thoughtful one. It just seems like that sometimes they have to. It just seems like that sometimes personalities trump politics, and people need to get ahead. People use their personalities to get ahead instead of, you know, being good messengers.
Well, and there's obviously going to be some of that no matter what. We see that in Hollywood. You know, we see that in entertainment in general. We talk about the people who we talk about, not because they are talented or, you know, incredible at what they do, as much as for the antics that they engage in. Nobody cares about Miley Cyrus's musical career or lack thereof, or canceling her shows or anything like that, as much as they care about what crazy thing is she gonna do next. Well, I think we have that in politics too, to a degree. You know, people watch, you know, major personalities on the right and on the left to see what kind of antics they'll be up to next. Oh, Lord, look what they did this time. That sort of thing. And there's a certain amount of entertainment involved in politics. We get that. It's boring otherwise to a lot of people. So, yeah, photo ops and you know, messaging tricks and things. You don't think that it hurt Ted Cruz with his base to show up with green eggs and ham during his, you know, filibuster-et kind of thing, do you?
No. And I mean, you look at, you know, the stuff that, you know, the Rand Paul stand with Rand.
Right, which I put in a completely different category. But yes, I mean, that sort of stand with Rand things is something that plays very positively. I think the left had a field day with green eggs and ham, but I don't think Ted Cruz had to care very much. He's in a very safe position. He's got a lot of support in his state and in other states as well. He's going to be in the Senate, should he choose, for a very long time. So he's protected by saying that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a difference. I guess there's a difference between, you know, we've talked red meat
yes.
before, and while I know you are an omnivore, you are not always a political omnivore. I think you prefer more thoughtful discussions, that sort of thing. There's nothing wrong with red meat in the right context, right?
Right. You know, there's a certain amount of that you have to toss out to people so that they know that you're on their side, so that they're believing that you resonate with what they truly value. I mean, you have to send signals to people And red meat's a good way to do it, to let them know that you identify with them. I love that. What I don't love is people who that is the sum total of their political information and experience. When you get into the category of merely talking in red meat talking points, merely talking in a bluff and bluster kind of way, and not going deeper into issues, it is self-indulgent. And that brings me right back to Eric Erickson, who I definitely call in this instance self-indulgent. Eric Erickson is a very well-informed and very intelligent commentator and personality on the right who has done some great work at his site and pulling up and giving higher profile to issues that really need it. And he's also somebody who's walked the talk. He's run for office. He's held office. This sort of thing is important. But when he is out there talking about Wendy Davis's abortion Barbie, what he's not seeing is that leftist tactics actually work against statements like that and people like that. What he does is make the rest of us look very uncaring, unfeeling. There are better ways, in my opinion, to message around the abortion issue, to message around the horrible things that happen both to the woman involved and to the unborn child. And simply throwing abortion Barbie out there just gives the left just enough of a little thing to say to turn that on us and make us all look heartless. They're not engaging in those long discussions and those deep policy questions. They're looking to reach, the left is looking to reach people with the quickest, most simple messaging. They want to drive home a phrase. What do you think the left still today thinks about George W. Bush? What's the 4 words that resonate with most people about George W. Bush that the left gave them?
Well, fascist isn't 4 words, but it probably has something to do with Iraq.
Bush lied, people died. That has been the mantra on the left. Now, in the middle, that's caused a lot of people to have a really exhaustion with Bush. That kind of messaging has that exhaustion with Bush to the point where, and God, thank you very much, Jeb Bush doesn't have a very positive image anywhere either. And it's that dynasty sort of thing. Now, do you think Hillary Clinton is suffering from the same thing that her husband is? You know, that her husband, in the same way from her husband and his presidency? No, she's not. She's not suffering that at all. But if we refuse to acknowledge what the left tactics are and adapt to that and overcome that and try to fight it, then we're going to lose. And I'm sorry, winning is a valid goal. If your goal is just to be right, that's fine. You can do that, you know, behind a desk at a professorship somewhere, provided if you're conservative that you can get into the staff of a college. But being right doesn't mean you automatically win, and we forget that on our side. And we say, well, I'm just going to speak the truth, and the words are just going to permeate the air and go into people's, you know, very beings, and they're going to recognize the truth because it's the truth. No, that's not how it worked at all. Betamax was obviously a better quality system than VHS, but what stuck? VHS, because they had better marketing.
And so that's what needs. So it sounds like that marketing and messaging is. It seems like we get in these conversations all the time after every single election cycle and every single discussion. But isn't that a part of the problem? Is that it's so election focused instead of actually discussing? Okay, this is a 24/7 thing.
I think so. Let's look at the greatest issues that we face right now: privacy, self-defense, debt, government overreach, free speech, the jobs and the economy. Okay, all these things. Don't you think that there are ways to talk to people about those things that would make them listen to our side more and agree with us on things? Let's talk about privacy for one. That's a really easy one. I think that's an easy sell for conservatives, that the government has no business knowing, as Rand Paul says, what you do with your cell phone or anything else. We can sell that.
There's, of course, then we run into the thing about what happens when you run into so-called conservatives who have no problem with it.
Well, there was an interview with Kennedy and Rick Santorum recently where she had him on The Independence, and he was completely inarticulate, in my opinion, on what conservatism was. She's talking about the individual being the highest value, and he was talking about the ordering of society being the highest value, and what kind of society you organize and what people are free to do. His definition of pursuit of happiness was free to pursue the thing you ought to do.
Free to pursue the thing you ought to do?
Yes. How do you ever define that in a nation of 300 million people in a way that you can define it for someone else is insane.
Well,
How do you do that?
Okay, if we're not to defend Santorum here, but I think that at least in that situation, he was probably putting it from a religious standpoint.
Sure.
You ought to worship God. You ought to have a relationship with Him, an actual relationship with Him.
But here's the problem: is that
not everybody in this country is a Christian.
Well, it's even bigger than that. It's even bigger than that. When you're thinking about him saying that you are free to do what you ought to do, then who is deciding what you ought to do? Everything that the left does is about control. And some people on the right, they're comfortable with that control dynamic too.
Yep.
And that's why our friends, the Party at Choice, when we talk about all these political issues in terms of choice versus control and people being free to make more choices, we win. But we don't talk about issues that way. We talk about scolding people for holding, positions we disagree with, and we tune out and we turn off and we walk away. The problem is everybody's got to decide for themselves. And one of my fundamental principles, principle number 7, liberty looks like chaos. If you are choosing for yourself and I am choosing for myself and we're choosing different things, we both have different ideas about the value of how that's going to go in society and what that's going to make us look like. But ultimately, the founding fathers knew this and they recognized it well. The individual has to be the one whose interest is protected from government, from other people, all of that. Otherwise, you don't have society.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree with you 100%. When it comes to when the problem is with Santorum is, and I think, and Templeton the Rat said this in the chat room. He made the comment about how Rick Santorum is a statist and a particularly awful one. Yeah, I agree. Is that he does come off that way. He is a big government social conservative, to use a term from Michelle Ray.
Right. Well, look at one of the questions they had that was difficult for him to answer. Kennedy was talking about, the way he says that government should be in the bedroom and around bedroom issues. And he's taking that to mean abortion and arguing that doesn't happen in a bedroom. That was a vacuous statement to me because bedroom issues are not just, you can't just classify abortion. Are people allowed to engage in relationships with people that society heretofore before this did not approve of said relationships? Are we going to regulate the kind of activities people can engage in their bedroom? And that is an important question because Texas only recently got rid of their sodomy laws.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, how is that anybody's business? I don't care what, societal interest you think it serves.
We have a question from the chat, or a comment from the chat, from Titan, who said, "Fishy, bless you, but you're arguing a college thesis in a soundbite world now."
Oh, I agree with Titan that it is a soundbite world. And one of the other things he said is talking about messaging to the half of the country that are flat out idiots, a quote from him. I agree there are a lot of people who are unengaged and who don't pay attention and who are swayed by that kind of messaging. But that is the political reality that we face right now. And it has been the political reality for as long as this country's been around, essentially. People didn't have time to debate and discuss these issues in a heady way, even at the founding of this nation. Why it was so difficult for the founders to have those ideas spread is because so many people couldn't write. They were involved in making a living. Whatever was going on at the government barely affected them, that sort of thing. But this is the political reality we're living in. These are the people that we have to get enough of to agree with us in order to win.
How would you phrase a... let's do this. I'll pick a topic. How would you do a simple discussion when somebody says, "Hey, what about guns?" How would you message that?
That one's not really as difficult as one would think. It's very easy to point to police response times and say, I'm trusting myself to take care of a problem faster than the police. I can't carry a cop around with me. Those are really easy points to make if you're engaged in thinking very quickly about how to make those points. You can talk about people who have saved their own lives or the lives of others with proper use of firearms. And you can also say, yeah, firearms can fall into the wrong hands. They absolutely can. And there are mechanisms that we try to do our best, but we're not going to be able to prevent all tragedies. And I'd rather be able to prevent my own tragedies than have the government tell me that I can or cannot own a gun, based on where I live or what neighborhood I'm in, that sort of thing. Again, it goes back to control. Is the government going to control who owns the guns? Who has the ability to defend themselves? Are we going to let the government decide you're worthy to defend yourself and you're not? Those are really easy points to make.
I really think that there are some people on both the right and the left who are perfectly fine with that. The government deciding stuff. Yeah.
Well, they are until it happens to them. You see all these people that are gun control advocates that are in powerful positions or that have a lot of money. They sure do have bodyguards around them. They believe in guns. They don't believe in you having guns.
Yeah, I think no. I'm trying to think of a response there, and I don't think I have one. And I'm someone who believes in the constitutional description of the Second Amendment, which means that if I could, I'd go out and buy a Thompson machine gun. But that's beside the point. All right, let's take. You would think that debt would be something easy to message.
No, I wouldn't.
Because you sit there and you say, well, you have a checkbook you have to balance, right? You have to make sure. But maybe it's because we're in this credit card society where people are running up debts. You look at one of the comments that the president liked to talk about was, you deserve a house. You deserve this. You deserve that.
I hate that word. I hate that word.
A roof over every head and a chicken in every pot.
Right. Well, and this is, again, left tactics. Everything that there's missing. And there will always be some lack of perfection on Earth. And they will always pick part of that and say, aren't we going to be a society that blank? That feeds every child. That houses every person. That gives everyone an equal opportunity for an education. That gives everyone a job that they can, make a, what's the word? What's the phrase? No, there's that phrase that says that you have enough, that you can, it's killing me. Why can I not think of this phrase? It's the phrase that says that you can support yourself with your money. It's not just that you have an adequate.
We'll just put it that way. You can have
living wage. Thank you, New Jersey Libertarian. Living wage. Thank you, darling. That is it. You know, they talk about everybody's right to have a living wage. And then you have, there's always going to be a lack. There's always going to be, because this is earth and not heaven, there's always going to be a place where they can say, oh, we are insufficient. We are not a good society because we don't do X for these people, whatever it is.
So how do you combat that?
Well, there's a lot of people for whom expectations are that life is going to be perfect, that it's going to be that sort of, you're not going to have any problems, or that we can fix everything for everybody. Conservatives, deep in their philosophy, recognize that we are not going to have a perfectible earth. There's no way to do it. Now, is that sexy messaging? No. No, not at all. And you better not be caught trying to message short term on that life isn't perfect and sorry, and that's really horrible and terrible. But we do have to talk about trade-offs, and that is something conservatives message improperly or imperfectly. But that is the essence of what we're pushing, and that is why messaging is so important. Because
what do you mean by trade-offs?
Well, okay, you could have every person in this country have a home, and you could make that happen. But are you going to be able to afford the amount of money it's going to take to put all those people in the homes? Who's going to raise that money? Where is it going to come from? You could educate every child in college. You could pay for them to go to school from kindergarten, or now early childhood development, all the way to college. You could. It would be a lovely thing if every child could be educated. But what are the costs of doing so? And what the liberals and progressives do is they try to say, if you're watching the wallet, if you're watching the money, you don't care about X issue. Well, we've got to get around that by showing different ways to care about people. That is what people want to know, that you care about their problems. Sadly, not that there's the best policy out there or the smartest policy, but do you understand where I'm coming from? That's what they want to hear.
Well, and it's not just that. I mean, you've got to be able to point out that there are such things as soup kitchens and charities and other places that are helping out.
Well, and we do a lot of that. We don't sell our ability to engage in those things either. We don't tout our successes in those areas. There's a lot of good being done in education in private schools and scholarships that are available to kids, but you're not going to hear about that because it's not sexy. You need to spend a lot of time telling people the stories around, hey, there's this terrible opportunity or terrible neighborhood that we had an opportunity to turn around using X, Y, or Z. Look what we did. Look what we did by investing the time. Look what we did by investing the resources. And look, this was done without government assistance. But what you're increasingly also finding is that governments are regulating that. There's a feeding ordinance in Texas that says you can't get those homeless people fed in certain places. You can't go and say, we're going to bring sandwiches to the homeless, because there are all these laws against it now. So while government is saying that people aren't individually trying to help, when they do, they're shutting them down.
I was having this discussion earlier today, and we haven't talked social issues that much. We've mentioned abortion. We haven't talked gay marriage. It seems like the biggest fight, at least when it comes to gay marriage, is that there are people who are voting for gay marriage bans, or voting voting against gay marriage. It is not that they hate gay people. They just don't want they just don't want a couple walking into their church and saying, "Marry us."
I think there's some of that. I think there is. And there are some religious liberty issues around the issue of gay marriage that have not been sufficiently protected, I guess, in the places where gay marriage has become law or something like that. But where I come down to this on this messaging is first of all, Is that the biggest issue that we're facing right now? Why are we putting so many resources into dealing with that? You see, if it doesn't affect a huge amount of the population, and the problem is that gay marriage as an issue doesn't affect a huge amount of the population directly, but there's a whole generation of kids coming up for whom it's not a big deal, and they're looking at the way we message those things. They're looking at how we talk about it, and they're seeing us characterized as bullying, mean, discriminatory, exclusionary, that sort of thing. And we have to deal with that. We have to understand that that's a reality there.
Of course, the reality that I'd like to see is that, we just get out of marriage. The government gets out of marriage completely.
Well, and it's the simplest solution, but you can't find a lot of conservatives to go along with that either.
Yeah.
Pay equality, gay marriage, gender recognition, minimum wage, all of this stuff that they've been trying to make an issue on the left, a really broad issue. It plays well because it has really sad stories around it. Who could be against love? That was one of the questions or the answers that came up when Marvin Olasky asked the question of a forum here that Ted Cruz had talked about. Who could be against love? I mean, that is the sort of messaging we're up against. But those are not issues that, A, we're going to win on very decisively, regardless of how strong our feelings are. But B, they don't, in essence, deal with the desperate understanding that we got to have of how bad government is. When we talk about issues in terms of control and choice and how bad government is to keep choices away from people, then we win. But if you can't frame those issues in that term, then we got a problem there.
Titan in the chat room said, marriage is now a federal tax issue, hence it ain't going away, Taylor. Well, yeah, and I realized that. Titan, it's been a federal tax issue since 1899, 1914. In between that areas where it really became a federal tax issue. And in that situation, I think that I think that there is a way that you can discuss it, and there's a way that you can convince people to do it, and that's where the nuanced discussion comes from, where you sit down with someone and you say, okay, listen, this is why. Now, some people you aren't going to be able to convince, and I think that is something that we need to realize, is that some people we just won't be able to convince.
Well, we have to bring more people to our cause. How do we best do that? We've got to be understanding the people that we need to bring to our cause, first and foremost. And what we get on our side, from the criticisms on our side, when people like, say, Rand Paul go to Berkeley or Detroit or Howard University, is that they're selling out, they're watering down our message. And that's the criticism they get. And it's insane because, again, you have to go to the people. You have to create the cognitive dissonance. They're being messaged that you're a villain. If you go there and you talk to them and you listen to them, you're showing up and making the left liars with your different way of talking about things and listening to people. But if we let the media define us by default, we're always going to lose.
Yeah, and it seems like I don't know. I sit there and I look at where people. I will go and look at where people talk, where people show up and talk. Whether it's the 24-hour news station, whether it's Howard University, whether wherever. And to use, let's look at. Let's use the Ted Cruz and Rand Paul. Ted Cruz tends to stay at Fox, but he has branched out a lot. Rand Paul seems to be all about branching out. And then also, making sure that he appears at, on Megyn Kelly or on Sean Hannity to discuss, or on Neil Cavuto. I mean, that's something that not a lot of people are doing, it seems like. Most people seem to be perfectly happy with being on Fox, being on The Blaze. Not that there's anything wrong, but you do have to reach out to people.
Right, and we can't stay in our bubbles. We can't. The bubble mentality is killing us. If we only go to the news sources that agree with us, if we criticize an article just because it's from Slate without going and actually examining the article, and I have had that situation happen to me. I've shared something from Slate that was dismissed completely because it was from Slate, even though it was an author that I respect and points that I agreed with and I thought were worthy of consideration by a lot of people. If we keep doing that bubble crap, we're going to end up shrinking as a movement, as conservatives in general, because we've got to know what the other side is saying and we've got to go challenge it. And we're not doing that as a movement as much as we could, which is why I'm hugely supportive of Rand Paul going to every constituency he possibly can. I've done it. I've gone in front of a black urban radio station 5-1 against me on the air with different people in the room talking about Tea Party issues. I've gone and talked to people from Occupy, sitting across the table from people in Occupy and had discussions. I've sat across from the table from people at women's Republican events and talked to them as well and was their speaker. And I've had positive response from all places because I'm not saying anything different when I go to those places, but I'm definitely reaching them with the way I say things.
And let's remember stuff, is that there are things that that we can agree with Occupy on. It sounds insane, but there are things we can agree with Occupy on. Whether we sit there and say, hey, we agree that there are problems with the government being involved with cronyism, the government being involved in corporations, or corporations having, if you want to say, too much power. As much of a free market capitalist that I am, I think the biggest problem that we have is that there are some groups that end up getting too much power with their leaders, and in that situation, that's where you got to have leaders who are willing to resist that urge.
Well, and where do most regulations come from and regulators come from? They come from the industries that they are regulating. So, of course, there's that protectionist thing, and that's a huge part of the crony problem. And Occupy was right in terms of that. Their solution was wrong. Hey, let's get more government involved. Derp. But they had some valid points, and where Tea Party could have, attempted, I guess, to message there and agree in some ways and say, you're perfectly right. There's way too much government and there's way too much corporate involvement in government. So let's shrink government. If there's fewer dollars, if there's less power in Washington, there's going to be fewer dollars going to Washington. And then politics is all about money sort of has a little bit less of an investment because there's no motivation to send all your money to lobbyist groups in Washington to do your bidding.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about going and talking to the Occupy leaders, the ones who were, if you look at Occupy Unmasked, who were really, union folks who were, trying to do this sporadic thing that really wasn't that sporadic. No, I'm talking about the ones who ended up being caught up in everything, being able to sit down and have conversations with them. That's what we're talking about.
Right. And when you look at what happened with Tea Party versus what happened with Occupy, there was obviously more substance and depth in Tea Party because those people, while they may not be out rallying right now, they're embedded. They're embedded as candidates. They're embedded as political activists. They're embedded in party structures. And they're getting more and more embedded to where people are always wondering, who's the Tea Party candidate? Nobody's asking who's the Occupy candidate.
Yeah. Because the Occupy candidate normally tends to be the, Democratic candidate.
Right, they already got that.
Yeah. Felicia Cravens, where can we find you?
FreeRadicalNetwork.com, of course, where my latest was all about messaging. And Facebook, Twitter at something fishy with an IE instead of a Y.
And I got to ask this before I let you go. How did you get the IE instead of the Y?
Well, the Y was taken. No, seriously, I like the name Something Fishy. I've had it since I had a puppetry business ages ago. And when I went online, I found out that the site was taken for Something Fishy with a Y, and I just like it better now.
All right. Well, and you can find me at EYE Desert Blog. That's at EYE Desert Blog. Thank you, everyone, for being here on Saturday Night Cigar Lounge, for being involved in the chat, even those who showed up late. Felicia Cravens, thank you for being here. As I said,
always fun. Thank you.
You can find me at EYE Desert Blog, at EYE Desert Blog, and I doubt you would find either Fishy or I being involved in Operation America Spring, which if folks want to know before I sign off, an event slated for Friday that promised to bring millions of Americans to Washington D.C. to oust President Obama and other key leaders failed incredibly. Only a few dozen people were there instead of the millions that they thought would. Oops.
Sorry, folks.
Oops. Anyway, thanks again, folks. We will catch you next week. Tomorrow, be sure to listen to, as long as he's not working, listening to Next with Jonathan Sangster. Monday is obviously Their Finest Hour with Alan Bordius. Tuesday, the Roundtable of Extreme Liberty. Wednesday, Modern Comments, followed by the simulcast of the Right War. Thursday, America Our Way, then the simulcast of the Right War. Friday, the Conservative Feminist Show, and Saturday, Saturday Night Cigar Lounge. We'll talk with you next week. Thanks, guys.
This show is copyright by VLR Media. All opinions of panelists and guests are their own and may not reflect the opinion of VLR Media, the host, or anyone else.